So now it's your turn. Any questions?
So
What?
you talked about the change in tones.
Yes.
Jerusalem, 8th century. Was there a strong influence from Islam that caused that, or was that something that?
I really can't speak to that. I'm imagining that because of the fact they were in the Middle East, you can't get away from origins of music from where you live. You really can't. You know, you live in the United States, and you know that if you go to the southern part of the United States, there's a different style of music in certain areas. You go to the western part of the United States, there's a different thing out west. We have these regional things. And regional music, if you look to the similarities between whether it be Islamic music, whether it be Jewish music, they had that sense of those microtones being used. So whether it be influenced by Islamic, I will tell you that in the Islamic tradition, you're not allowed to sing music from the mosque outside of the mosque. It's one of those things that you take anything that's done in their practices is not to be sung outside of there. There is very little music that kind of leaks out of that tradition. I did a piece here at Copley High School probably 15 years ago that I opened up our December concert with something in Hebrew, then something from Ezekiel by the composer Ethan Sperry, who was previously at Miami University in Ohio, and now he's in Portland State. And he had this piece, and it was beautiful, demanding of the bass section, but it was just powerful in that very, very hypnotic kind of movement in half steps and microtones. And then I closed off with, Blue Christmas by Elvis. So you do a little bit of everything in school, you can do that, as long as you do everything. But the idea of tones having its roots, I think it's just basically out of the whole tradition of the Middle East, all those influences. Other questions? Yeah, Zoe.
First of all, I didn't know that the tones were Orthodox. I thought they were Byzantine only. I don't know why I thought that. But my question for you is, I know in our church, the Greek church,
yeah,
we used the Western, G clef and all that. What do you use? Do you use that too?
Yes, yeah. Pretty much I would say in the majority of Orthodox churches in America, we use the standard notation, 5 lines, 4 spaces, treble clef, bass clef, and used how that it's used universally. Because here's the other thing. I'll tell you something about how tones, how things are intoned. In the Russian tradition and many of the Eastern traditions, C is the note that never changes, and so that's always do. Okay, that's called fixed do. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Do is C. So you'll hear church conductors give pitches do, la, fa. Well, me being a school teacher, I said, wait a minute, I love that system. I grew up with that. But what I did is I go according to the key because that's movable do. We're in the United States. It's kind of like, okay, are we going to measure everything in meters and centimeters, or do we everything in yards and feet and inches? We do that. Well, everything that's taught in schools, we don't teach fixed do except for at university level. Kids in schools learn movable do. So if it's in C, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. If it's in B flat, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. It moves. Because otherwise, you get do, la, fa, and if you write something in the key of G, it's re, si, sol, but I sing so, mi, do. It's in the key of G. I don't want people that are not used to that type of learning music. This is completely separate from church music, learning music, to have to learn a whole new system to hear pitches. And many times you'll just choir directors, instead of going do, la, fa, or sol, mi, do, they'll go la, 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 and give pitches so that it's understood what is heard. Okay. Other questions? Yes?
When did women start singing in Orthodox choirs?
Oh, good question. When did women start singing in Orthodox choirs? Well, you know what? I don't know if there's anything actually written about how women started singing in choirs, because it says monasticism, and it's used everywhere. I don't know that I have an answer for that. And I will say this. I'm glad you asked that, Elizabeth. My recommendation to everybody, if you don't know the answer to that, refer to someone who does, and don't make up an answer just to sound good. And I don't know that I know the answer to that. I'd have to think about when that actually happened, because I'm thinking probably I would say in Russian tradition, probably in the time about Bortnyansky, when you had it in that near classical period, towards the end of the Renaissance, in the 1700s, when they started having choirs that were singing 4-part music. Some of those directors were composers rather. Some of the composers were westernized and started writing things and doing things in choral sessions. Bob?
Singing from the Syrian in like the 4th century was putting together female choral choirs, singing his music, his hymns.
Yeah, and you also have female hymnographers, Saint Cassiana, that you have that. So, but singing in choirs per se in churches, that's probably with that as early as the 4th century. But then I guess in Eastern Europe, I don't know, to be honest.
I thought that was kind of unusual because that was the first time I'd seen that.
Well, but do you know, was that in the monastery itself?
I didn't see that part.
Okay.
It just said that he was using some local music and creating all these hymns, and he had female choirs presenting them. So.
Well, you do have female monasteries.
Oh yeah. The monasteries I mentioned in Jerusalem, not known as the female monasteries, but even today, if you go to Elwood City, if you go into Livonia, Michigan, you'll have the female monasteries, and they sing everything. But I know when that started. That's a very good question to research, Elizabeth. Thank you. Other questions? Yes, Father Glenn.
Sometimes you can pay attention, of course. Certain scores have a term that I would ask you to elaborate on and explain it. It says obichod. It's a Russian.
Yes.
Repeat the question.
Yeah, obichod, the question was, in some of the things it'll say obichod. And that is just simply, that was the place that the obichod, the tones were developed according to the obichod tradition in Volokolomsk in 1575. And so that was a specific space that they made the obichod, because I can show you examples. The obichod is one tradition. Another tradition out of those 8 tones is also the Kievan tradition. And the Kievan tradition is used a lot in a lot of the Russian backgrounds. The obichod has that 8 tones, just like the Kievan does as well. Does that answer that question for you?
Yes, to some extent that corresponds to a more conventional, more everyday practice of having the composition presented.
I think the obichod kind of lends itself to that. It doesn't, and again, this is one of the things that the tones were developed to not to be flowery and ornamental. It was used so that you can sing these hymns, as I share with you out of the book, that you can just go and just sing that hymn. And if you know that the parts that you sing this part and you sing this part, and then you just go with it, and then it just changes as you sing through those hymns. The Kievan chant, a little more difficult, but still simple. And many of the places came up with their own chants along those lines to speak to that, keeping it simple so that everyone can participate.
Yeah, that's what we take advantage of OCA
Yes.
site, because it's presented this way, and it's suitable to the abilities of our choir.
And even beyond that, I can tell you that when we have large gatherings, when we did the All-American Council this year, some of the music just said tone 2, words, obichod, and here's the pitches, and we sang. And there was no music to it, but guess what? Everybody sang. They knew the tone. Yes, Father.
Yes, but with in other words, you can apply that style to, let's say, Bortnyansky 7.
Yeah. And there's the things, and those are discussions for another day too, as far as the hymnography. I was fortunate to attend a workshop of Father Sergei Glagoyev of blessed memory, who Father Sergei grew up in Ohio. His father was a priest in Lorraine, Father Andrew. He was a composer himself, but Father Sergei went to Oberlin. And we all know Oberlin is a conservatory of music and outstanding. Well, he was a great musician and a great priest, and then he wrote a lot of liturgical music. But he said at the same time, at the time I was at this workshop, it was a time when some congregational singing started to pop up in American Orthodoxy, where they were trying to get everybody to sing, but they took away the parts and they said everybody sing together, like, okay, this isn't the same. It wasn't Byzantine chant, it was simplifying a lot of the Russian tradition, making a single line. And some people were like, okay, and when he was asked about that, he said, there are some things that you can sing together. Certainly. You don't want to make the creed, because here's the thing. People should sing in church. Everybody should be singing in church. But and you think about it, the various versions of the creed, they're all singable. There's nothing that's too difficult to sing. He said, and there are some things though, but the cherubic hymn should be sung by a choir. Because that is a hymn. It's specifically called a hymn. Hymns should be sung by people who are able to sing that and establish that meaning and elevate that meaning through the beauty of the music. And there are so many different versions of the cherubic hymn. We all know that. But there are some that's not is easy to sing for just the average singer. I will be honest with you, I pulled out one a few years ago that no one had ever done before, and it was in Church Slavonic, and it was more difficult because it was by Modest Mussorgsky. And it was a little challenging, and so we just put that aside. I said, maybe some other day, we'll come back to that. But it's beautiful, but it's like, okay, you have to have a fleet of musicians. Realize that one of the things that I didn't bring to light is when we go to Eastern Europe, especially in Russia had paid musicians. They paid their singers. Don't get any ideas. They paid their singers to sing in the choirs. They were great singers, and even to this day now, that when the Orthodoxy was reinvigorated after the fall of the Soviet Union, they came back into the choirs. And so they're magnificent singers, great singers, but they're also paid. So different thing altogether. Other questions?
Of contemporary American Orthodox composers, who would you say does a great job?
Benedict Sheehan did a great job when he was at St. Tikhon's, writing a lot of pieces of music. He's no longer attached to that, and his music is wonderful during the time period he was writing there. He's since pursued a career in secular music and has kind of abandoned that side. It's all to taste, because to be honest with you, I don't examine a lot of other forms of music outside of the Russian Orthodox tradition. I'm not well versed enough to say. I know that there are a lot of composers, and I was going to have a conversation with Zoe about the number of compositions, especially starting around the 1950s, when in the Greek Orthodox Church, there were composers that started writing their own liturgies, their complete liturgies, that were writing things. I think, but there hasn't been a lot of composers that have dabbled. There's, try and recall, at Northern Kentucky University, and I can't recall his name, they actually did a combination of Benedict's music and his music on a CD, and it was beautiful music, but it's a little bit different again with its tonality and some of the dissonances that create it that don't have that same reference, the same reference to traditional Orthodox music.
What about sort of American adaptation, hymns that are sort of put to American music, like the Appalachian Christ is Risen?
And that's the Appalachian Christ is Risen, for those not familiar. That's where some people, there's a fine line in that sand. There are some people who love it, and some people say, nope, it doesn't belong. This is an opinion. This is an opinion. You need to know your audience. You need to know your parishioners. You need to have a conversation with your clergy. What do they think? Because the last thing you want to do is create a discomfort that doesn't have to be there. Because the thing is, regardless of the different versions that there are of things, there's an Appalachian, the show called Out of San Francisco. It was written as an Appalachian hymn to the Theotokos. It is truly me to bless you, O Theotokos. Open intervals. Similar to what somebody says, like Aaron Copland, in open interval sound. It's beautiful, but is it Orthodox? Well, okay, let's take a step back and compare it to what Orthodox theology says. Is it distracting? Is it something that's, and the beauty of it, I will say of both of those, and Vlad Morrison, who's done tremendous work as a composer, arranger of things throughout, for decades now, and kind of like the patriarch of American Orthodox music in many ways for the OCA. There are things that are written that when they're composed, do they work in the tradition that you want, and are they tonal enough to not have all these dissonances that are familiar into that specific tradition? And that's kind of the key. When I talked about Benedict Sheehan, he had some of those small dissonances, but they're kind of non-harmonic tones. They're not actually dissonances that clash with things. Sanders is the name in Northern Kentucky. I'll have to look it up to find out what it was. Again, I apologize. But now his music has a little bit more of that difference. But the appellation, again, it's personal taste to how you work with that and what your choir is going to be able to do, and what your singers are able to accommodate and what your listeners want to hear. That's the other thing. Other questions? Yes.
So do you there's always this discussion about, like I'm the Greek Orthodox Church.
Yeah.
We do some Greek. Do you do Russian or English, or how? Ours is mixed.
Yeah, we in our particular church right now, we have, since I've been there, in 40 years, it kind of predates me that they were doing English was the first Sundays of the month, and the last Sunday of the month, a certain amount of Slavonic. Since I've been there, it's dwindled to just a few hymns in Church Slavonic because, again, in my view, and kind of I think what the view of the church is the fact that, as St. Paul said, you teach in the language of the people, and the language of the people is English. And so we try to do that if we're going to evangelize. I don't want people to come. I don't want to go to a church where I don't understand what's going on. Like, okay, I'm not coming back. And so there's a balance, and we've created a balance with that. And but the other thing is too, and not everybody agrees with it, but like when we do Pascha, we'll sing Christ is risen in a variety of languages. I think right now we sing in English, we'll sing in Russian, we'll sing in Greek, we'll sing in Arabic. I've got one this year that we might be looking at Finnish. We sing in Spanish, we sing in French, because it's a universal message. It's a universal message to share. But I think my personal opinion, again, my personal opinion is we should be as much English as we possibly can in the United States. Yeah, Lisa.
So if someone like you or anyone else were interested in composing music, is there a council who evaluates and determines
No.
like what's acceptable?
Yeah, no, there's not. As a matter of fact, I serve on the Diocese of the Midwest from the OCA. We have a music ministry committee, and I serve on that committee, and that question came up last year because someone was asking their priest about a piece of music that they wrote. Can they perform this in church? And so they went to the bishop, and the bishop said, I'll defer to the committee. So we had a discussion about that, and we said, we need to have that discussion about, does it fit into the realm of Orthodox music? Does it fit their traditions that they celebrate in their specific parish? Does the clergy does the priest at that particular parish think this fits? And that's kind of where we left it, because there's not a committee to actually go through that. Because
Not even one like big overarching one for.
No, because
That's actually really surprising.
Well, as composers, I mean, I think what has happened up to this point, maybe it's forthcoming, but to this point, you kind of compose with the idea of you want to stay in the realm of that. I've done some liturgical composition for my specific church, for different things. Some of the things have gone out, and they're different places around the United States now, because I wrote just an example, I wrote a hymn for the communion hymn for Palm Sunday. And it's very simple. The text is, "Blessed is he that comes in the name of the Lord. God is Lord and has revealed himself to us." So I see the light. Is that a cue? No. I wrote it so that the ladies start first, the men answer, then they come together. And they sing this. And what's wonderful for me is every Palm Sunday we sing it, I hear people downstairs singing it. And that's what we want, because this is their message. Blessed is he that comes in the name of the Lord. God is Lord and has revealed himself to us. But then there are other pieces I've written, because there are certain times that, you know, we've read certain prayers in church, but I said, you know what, that should be sung. For instance, a kathismal or settling hymn, a kathisma hymn. I just this year I've written a kathisma hymn to use, because I think the words, just saying the words doesn't project it as well. And to talk about the soldiers with their inhumanity, and taking Christ down from the cross. So I said it needs music to elevate that message. Otherwise it gets centered in with all the other texts that we're saying, that people are familiar with this psalm, they're familiar with this. And then, so I said that needs to stand out a little bit. So I've composed something that we're going to work on to see if it works or not. Because there's sometimes you'll work on something like, okay, this works, and no, it doesn't. Okay. I've written some, but most of the things I do, I wrote a first antiphon that's, I know that a couple of other churches now do, that people have done that, and a second antiphon, in fact, that people do, because they just, it flows with a natural variety. It just fits with everything else, the realm of everybody else's music. The key to it is that when composers are looking to compose music, they really need to look through the history of all the other composers in that vein. And what's acceptable, what has been accepted, and what has been really utilized, and what was like, oh, it was composed, but it's put aside. Because that happens too. There are some things in some people's files, they sang that 50 years ago, say, we don't ever sing that again. Because it was just different, and it didn't fit the style of what should be done. But that's, again, it's jurisdictional, and it's by that faith practice in that particular church and where that should be going. Okay. Other questions? Yes?
What do you think of Arvo Part and some of his more spiritual?
Arvo Part, I have a book on Arvo Part, and his music is beautiful. And here's the thing, Arvo Part's music is beautiful. You have other composers. John Tavener became an Orthodox composer. He was an English composer in the 1900s, and he became Orthodox, and he wrote some beautiful pieces. And contemporary in sound, and I even did some of those with some of my choirs in school. But Arvo Part's music is stunning, because he's Estonian. An Estonian composer, Estonian Orthodox, and beautiful music. But again, it's one of those things where the practicality of performing some of his works in church it's highly impractical. Anyone else?
In the same context,
Yes.
we can mention the composer Ilarion Alfei.
Yes.
Okay. Besides these massive choral and orchestral works, he has liturgical pieces.
Yes, and that's very true. You have higher works who have written things. As a matter of fact, we did his opening Great Litany 2 Sundays in a row these past 2 weeks. And even czars were known to compose music. Even the czars in Russia were writing music, because it's like, okay, this is part of what they were, because remember, there was a connection with the church. Some of it was self-centered, because if they keep the people happy, they won't revolt. But that's the truth. But they were some of them were actually religious. They were actually engaged in their faith in the church. If there are any more questions, I just want to say one other thing. The Orthodoxy Sunday Vespers will be here, and yours truly will be directing. I've been asked to direct the choir for here, so you're all welcome to sing. We'll have rehearsals starting on February 8th, presumably, and the 15th and the 22nd. Look for details from your directors at your churches. Okay. Without anything further, Annie, if you would, thank you.